Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss something that David Cameron said in response to questions from a journalist about the Tories' mess of an asylum policy in which he sounded like he was having a pop at Brexit and even the Brexit attitudes within his own party. This is likely to go down like a lead balloon amongst the swivel-eyed loons who already don't like him being in cabinet. So in a nutshell, our problem with small boat crossings is we do not allow people fleeing war or persecution from claiming asylum in the UK in general terms. There are a very small number of situations where we have a process, but too few. For example, the government openly admits that Afghanistan has not been safe ever since the Western Alliance opened the door to the Taliban and withdrew. And yet we have a lot of Afghans coming across the channel in small boats. Why is this? Because there's no process, there's no safe route for them to flee the Taliban to claim asylum in the UK unless they get here under their own steam, which often means a dangerous channel crossing. That is the reality of the situation. The Rwanda plan is not a solution to that problem. You know, the idea of Rwanda being a deterrent, when first of all the government says it's all marvellous, by the way, and it's all safe, but the idea of it being a deterrent to people who will risk their lives in the channel. Everyone with a brain knows that it's nonsense. Just as with Brexit, everyone in the Conservative Party has to pretend that it's actually a brilliant plan. And so it was that David Cameron was asked about it and specifically asked if he would have gone along with such a scheme if he were the Prime Minister. He initially tried to dodge the question by saying, oh, things are very different when I was Prime Minister. It's like, yeah, it's an obvious evasion, mate, because we're not asking about your time when you were Prime Minister. We're asking what your policy would be in the here and now if you were now Prime Minister. But what he did say is at the time he was Prime Minister, we had a situation whereby we could return people to France. He said he'd love that situation to be the case again. He added that this would be the most sensible thing, right? He said, people land on a beach in Kent, you take them straight back to France. Now that sounds like Reform UK's policy, doesn't it? Only this is what actually used to happen, which is why the small boat crossings of this nature basically didn't happen in the past. It's why this issue of lots of asylum seekers crossing the channel in dodgy boats is a phenomenon which began only a few years ago. And I mean, literally since the headbangers took over the government. Except, as Cameron notes, this is not an option now. Reform UK say, we would just take these asylum seekers back. Well, they don't call them asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, back to France. Well, they can't because they won't have France's permission to do so. Cameron was asked if we should be trying to get this system back, and he said it's not available at the moment. He was then asked if this is because of Brexit. Now then, what was Cameron's response to this? He didn't say either yes or no, of course not. He can't say no because it's patently untrue. The former agreement was based on being a member of the EU. It wasn't specifically an EU membership arrangement. We had various arrangements. There was the Dublin Agreement, which was for EU members, but we had specific agreements with France as well. But those agreements were based on our common membership of the EU. But Cameron couldn't also say yes to the question, of course it's Brexit, because he now has to pretend that Brexit's a great idea. Part of his responsibility for being in a government which is not allowed to say anything nasty about the unholy Brexit. So when asked if this was because of Brexit, he just said, and I quote, because of the situation we're in and because of the attitude of others. Lovely politician's answer. So he says we can't get this arrangement because of the situation and the attitude of others. Now, what is the situation? What is the attitude? And who are these others? The situation's easy. We underwent a hard Brexit, something Cameron is known to have been against, even though the useless streak of piss is the one who set it up because he was too weak not to. That's the situation. Although Cameron's response was ambiguous, there's no other possible interpretation. It's not even like when he was asked if it was down to Brexit, he said, no, it's just the circumstances we're in. No, he didn't say that. He just said, situation we're in. And that's the only situation we're in. Brexit, he couldn't deny it was Brexit because it so obviously is Brexit. But the attitudes and others who hold them, that's more open to interpretation. So who could that be and what attitudes could he be referring to? Does he mean the attitudes of the EU Commission? Or maybe just those of the French government? No, that couldn't possibly fit because we've never asked for this arrangement. It's not possible to say that we couldn't get it because of the attitudes in the EU generally or France specifically if we've never approached them for a continuation of the previous agreement. In fact, Labour have a policy of seeking such agreement when they're in power, something they couldn't have if France or the EU had explicitly ruled it out. So we won't actually know what the attitudes on the other end of such an agreement are until Starmer and Cooper try to negotiate them, because the Tories have never tried. So realistically, Cameron can only be talking about attitudes and others on our side of such an agreement. Now, does he mean the public? Does he think that public attitudes are preventing talks on such an agreement? Well, as I've just said, Labour have a policy of pursuing such an agreement, so they don't think public attitudes are against it. Does Cameron mean specifically Conservative target voters? Possible, but I think unlikely. Like, what polling exists which shows that Conservative voters don't want to return those who arrive in small boats to France? So taking a leaf from Conan Doyle's book, when we have eliminated other options, whatever we're left with must be the truth. The only people not wanting to even attempt to arrange such an agreement are those in the Conservative Party, specifically the Parliamentary Party. The attitude Cameron was talking about was of not wanting to arrange deals with the EU, not even wanting to talk to them on the part of some. And the others he was talking about, the far right or swivel-eyed loons, as a former Conservative Party chair once described them. What Cameron has done here is essentially say that the small boats problem cannot be solved in the best way because of Brexit and the Brexit attitudes of brexiteers within his own ranks. I genuinely cannot think of any other interpretation of Cameron's remarks which would make any sense. I imagine the usual suspects aren't going to be happy with this. They have never approved of Cameron being brought back into the fold. They took it as a sign that even their own party was pulling back from the extreme Tory Brexit when Rishi Sunak put the literal leader of the Remain campaign in charge of our foreign policy. And this little episode will have done absolutely nothing to calm their fears. Fun times. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.